April 1945. Southern Germany was collapsing like wet paper in a storm. The Allied advance had shattered what little structure remained. Thousands of civilians and auxiliary personnel scattered across roads, forests, and broken cities. Among those swept up were 19 German women from the Luftwaffe Signals Corps, captured near Stuttgart. They had never held a rifle, never seen the front, never fired a shot. They were clerks, decoders, switchboard operators, pulled into a war they barely understood. But they carried something far heavier than their duffel bags. A lifetime of propaganda about the one enemy they feared above all. Not Americans, not Russians, not the French, but black American soldiers. Men they had been taught since childhood to fear as inhuman, brutal, and dangerous. Now, with Germany collapsing and their own future decided by people they had never met, that fear tightened around their throats like a noose. The women were herded into a fenced courtyard of a commandeered farm. Rain soaked their thin uniforms. Some cried quietly, some sat rigid, refusing to show fear. Most simply stared at the ground, numb. A young auxiliary, Amelia Hartman, whispered to the woman next to her, "I heard if the black soldiers come." She couldn't finish the sentence. The older woman, Lisa Brandt, shook her head. "We do not know what is true anymore," thought the fear stayed. The kind of fear that had been fed to them for years, spoonful by spoonful, until it lived inside their bones. A white American lieutenant approached the fence with a clipboard. "All right, ladies," he said. "You'll be transferred to a processing camp within the hour. Supply trucks are on their way." A murmur rippled through the group, a murmur that froze them cold. Supply trucks. From the colored quartermaster battalion, reaction was instant. Some women flinched away from the gate. One began trembling uncontrollably. Two grabbed each other's hands, knuckles white. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. "We are finished," she whispered. Lisa closed her eyes. She had lived long enough to know how hard propaganda rots truth. But even she felt her stomach twist. Engines rumbled down the dirt road. The women stiffened like hunted animals, and then the trucks appeared. All black American soldiers. Women pressed back against the fence, shrinking from the sight, expected cruelty, violence, mockery, confirmation of every horrible warning they had been fed. What they saw instead stunned them into silence. Just men. The soldiers hopped off the trucks, stretching their legs after hours on the road. One complained about the cold. Another joked about missing his mother's cooking. A third laughed as he picked mud off his boots. They weren't monsters. They weren't snarling or threatening. They were just young men, tired, hungry, human, but the real transformation hadn't started yet. Not until Sergeant Raymond Coleman stepped forward. Sergeant Coleman, tall and broad-shouldered, surveyed the terrified cluster of women. Their fear was painfully obvious. Their shaking hands, their wide eyes, their stiff posture. He took a slow breath. Then he spoke. Not harshly, not coldly, not with anger, but with a calm, steady kindness that pierced the morning air. "Ladies, you're safe. We'll take you to camp. We'll get blankets and a hot meal. No one here will harm you." The German interpreter repeated the words. The women stared at the sergeant as if he had spoken magic. Blankets? Food? Safety? From the soldiers they had feared the most? Lisa whispered, bewildered. "Why? Why is he gentle?" Amelia's voice shook. "They told us black soldiers had no pity. But Sergeant Coleman wasn't finished reshaping their world. As the women were being loaded onto the trucks, one detainee stumbled. Her bag, stuffed with the few belongings she still owned, slipped from her hands. She froze. Her breathing quickened. A panic attack fueled by propaganda and weeks of trauma surged through her. A black American private, Private Lewis Carter, only 22, stepped toward her. She recoiled violently, arms wrapping around herself in instinctive fear. Private Carter stopped, raised his hands slowly, spoke softly. "Ma'am, let me help you. Only help." Then, without waiting for her permission, but moving gently, deliberately, he lifted the bag, set it on the truck bed, and extended his hand. Not grabbing, not forcing, just offering, a simple human gesture. She stared at it. Everything she had been taught screamed at her to run, but everything she saw told her another truth. With trembling fingers, she finally touched his hand. He helped her up as though she were fragile glass, and that was it. That was the moment the lie broke. It's the moment she realized she had been fed poison her entire life. Not by the man helping her, but by her own government. She would later say in an interview, "When his hand touched mine, I felt humiliation. Not because he treated me badly, but because he treated me better than I had been taught he was capable of, and I knew the lie was ours, not his." As the convoy drove toward the POW processing site, the women listened to the soldiers' conversations. They talked about fried chicken, Mississippi summer's jazz music, their mother's baseball hopes for the war to end, dreams of going home, nothing violent, nothing hateful, nothing remotely close to the propaganda. Amelia whispered, almost to herself, "They sound like ordinary people." Lisa nodded slowly. "They sound like good people." The final shattering truth when they arrived at the camp. The women were met with warm blankets, clean water, hot soup, fresh bread, and the same black soldiers who had terrified them earlier moved equipment, stacked crates, and headed off to their next assignment without so much as a cruel word. One German woman stared after them, cheeks burning with shame. "We were told they were savage," she whispered. "But the savagery was in the lies we were taught." Years later, during a post-war interview, a former German nurse summed it up. "Those black American soldiers gave us more dignity in a single afternoon than our own leaders had given us in 12 years. And that quiet act of kindness, that single moment of truth, did more to dismantle Nazi ideology than any broadcast or leaflet ever could. Because sometimes the most powerful way to destroy a lie is simply to stand there, living proof that it isn't true. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, so more forgotten World War II truths can finally be heard.